Welcome back. Let's talk about investment in ZZZ. More specifically, I know a lot of individuals kind of like to go the route of getting all of the characters or just realistically any singular character they think is hot or cute or whatever. And if you want to go that route, perfectly fine. Waifu Meta is my top recommendation, whether it's a character you like the personality of, the design of, the gameplay of, go for that by all means. But if you eventually want to start singling things out and start competing your characters or eventually pushing into ambient content with a few characters, how should you plan that? In my opinion, as somebody who's played Genshin since launch and HSR since launch, there really is only one way. Yes, you can get a ton of characters. You can get every single character in the game and have a situation where you can use each and every one of them and where they, maybe in Genshin, for example, you pulled Yoimiya for Thundering Manifestation. Maybe you pulled Hu Tao for, not necessarily single target boss fights, but for one or two stronger units. And you pulled somebody like Lenny when you have more AoE to deal with. That does work, but I think that for the most part, hypothetically, if you like a character like Julian or Ellen, then even though these are early releases, and yes, early releases do eventually fall off, ZZZ, unlike HSR, isn't the game to where you really have to worry about the targeting priority of a unit. We don't have AoE units yet. Technically speaking, you could count Shinyi, but let's be honest here, she's not a DPS early on. I think that for the vast majority of people, if you want to complete your characters, your top priority should be at first their Jin, unless you have another 5-star alternative. For example, I'm not going for Koledas because I have Lycans for some reason. But I went for Chinyis because I didn't have a backup and didn't want to just keep trading off this one specific W engine. If you're aiming to invest in the characters, your supports will always be your top priority. Lucy, for example, gets a way more value out of her specific Eidolons or constellations or cinemas, whichever you want to call them, than somebody like Corrin does. This isn't because Corrins are bad, not by any means, but this is because Lucy is much more flexible and you can always maintain Lucy's value if you continue building into her. Whereas Corrin, or even Piper to that extent, if these are characters you use, even if you get constellations and cinemas on them, they may lose value if you get somebody else you like in the future. Hypothetically speaking, if I built up Corrin and then got Nekomata, but I like Nekomata more, then Corrin's just a dead weight at that point, and that's resources that could have been put into Nekomata. The same thing applies to realistically any character, any DPS. So, to plan around that, my personal recommendation is if you have a 5-star you like. Hypothetically, in this instance, let's go with somebody like Julian. Julian herself has some great cinemas, don't get me wrong. I think that if you want to aim for these, perfectly fine, sure, go ahead. I think every increase to your DPS's potential, whether that be from getting their signature engine, or getting refinements on it, or getting their cinemas, increases the longevity of that character. The stronger they are, the less likely they are to be benched by somebody else. But in every HoYoverse game, the thing that holds the most value are, respectively speaking, your supports. In this game, it would be your stun units or your dedicated supports. We don't have a 5-star support to look at. And so in this instance, if you like somebody like Chinyi, and you love your DPS, in my opinion, it would be Nekomata, because I like Nekomata a lot. Chinyi gets way more value from getting that cinema than somebody like Nekomata. This isn't because cinemas are bad, this is because Chinyi does more things. Getting Chinyi's weapon improves the team's damage by 20%. Getting Chinyi's Cinema 1 gives Death Down, which is always useful in every HoYoverse game, where C2 is more days. Meanwhile, Nekomata increases her own damage in every singular cinema. And so this isn't saying these are bad, but this is saying that support Eidolons and support increases hold more value for your accounts because not only does it improve your team's overall damage, but it also improves the flexibility of the respective supports. If you like one DPS, your goal should and can be eventually to pair them with somebody else. If you like Nekomiya, maybe you want to get Jane Doe to get that other physical unit. Maybe you want to build out Piper to occupy that physical anomaly slot. That's perfectly fine. Or you could instead look at other units. Maybe getting Nekomata's secondary ability isn't as useful as just getting a flat damage buff overall. Nekomata's second ability is a 35% skill damage buff stacking up to 2 times. Or you can get Shinji, and more specifically her weapon, and instead get a 20% damage buff universally. This applies to not only Nekomata and her skill, but also her burst, also her basic attack, every single thing she does. Yes, W engines are exceptional, but in my opinion, don't aim for them. Character-specific W engines for the standard banner always eventually get replaced. There's very rare cases where they remain exceptional. In Genshin Impact, Primordial Jadewing Spear is Xiao's best weapon, yes, and it's on the standard banner. But it's also really comparable to Staff of Homa. Staff of Homa is something you would like to use on way more characters so it holds more value. But other than that, every other standard weapon has been replaced because there's a better alternative, one that's more flexible. So if you are realistically having to choose between something like, hey, maybe you get more pulls from the shop and aim for a character, maybe you're on a guarantee or not, or you get a character's weapon, I'd honestly say that long term, a new character or additional copies of a character is more beneficial than a standard W engine. Don't get me wrong, a standard new engine can still be great, but if you know in the future you intend on replacing this, or maybe you can see some points to where you're like, this is good, but having to rely on hitting an enemy from behind is bad unless you have C1, then yes, this loses significant value, and you may want to go for something much more flexible in the future. Vertically investing within your characters always pays off in pretty much every miHoYo game. So if you have a character that isn't standard, because my god, I like Nekomata, but I have no guarantee I will ever get another copy of her. If you like a character that is limited, specifically if they are support, aim for additional copies of them. If you like a character that is limited and they're a DPS, aim for copies of them once you have a solid team. In HSR, a great character to aim for copies of is Acheron. But Acheron's team is very flexible because it's quantum based. Silverwolf, Fushuan, Sparkle. In this game, a lot of characters don't have their own individual team. We're taking a look at the roster now. Juyan has Nicole, but that's it. Nekomata has Piper, but that's it. Ellen is one of the few characters with a defined team that really benefits her. Same thing with Soldier 11. So if you really are looking into investing into your supports, your Juyan, your Nekomata, and so on, maybe hold out until you know what characters are coming in the future, first off. And second off, do attempt to see if you want to replace this team. My Nekomata team is Nekomata, Shinji, or Koleda, and Lucy. These are 3 characters who I legitimately enjoy, don't want to replace, but all of them are so flexible to the extent to where if a character that's better support for Nekomiya comes out and I like them more, I can willfully invest into them and not feel like I wasted anything. Because I also don't have a second DPS, because Soldier 11 is extremely boring as a character and these goggles are stupid. TR, invest vertically within limited characters you like. Don't spread yourself too thin because you're going to be poor resource-wise. You're not going to have enough gems and enough currency to roll for additional copies of new engines or weapons or specific cinemas. And every character can eventually be replaced. Your goal is instead not to chase after the strongest, but to make your character as strong as they can be so that you don't have to replace them or don't feel the need to. Waifu for meta is the endgame of every gacha game. Play for the characters you think are hot. Nekomiya is hot. Shinji is hot. So is Lucy, and so on. By the way, I'll see you next time.